With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sanhedrin Daf Samach Aleph. We began on Daf Samach Hamid Beis, the Mishnah, telling us regarding details of the grave sin of idol worship. And as we learned in our sugya, that we have really two psukim. We have a pasuk in Mishpatim Zoiveyach Lo Elohim Yacharam, from where we learn that when it comes to any avodah that is used in the Beis Hamikdash, slaughtering, but not only slaughtering, burning, pouring, which has in it included zrikas hadam, these avodas, and the Mishnah added also bowing down. If someone does that to a idol, God forbid, they're going to be chayiv skila, whether that is the usual way in which that idol is worshipped or not. That's called, even if this is shaloi kedarka, you're going to be chayiv skila. Truth be told, bowing down in the Beis Hamikdash is not a bona fide avodah. There were times that you needed to bow down. When Bikurim was brought, people bowed down on the Beis Hamikdash. When we heard the Shem HaMafoidish uttered, Mipi Kohen Gadol, we would bow down. But it's not part of the avodah. Nevertheless, there is another pasuk that speaks about hishtachava, all right? Vayeloch vayavoid Elohim acherim vayishtachu lahem, and the Torah right afterwards says v'hoitzei sasei ishahu for skila. So b'kitzur we have zvicha and we have hishtachava, and what the Braisa taught us is zvicha tells us regarding all of the avodos that are done in the pnim, that even if it's shaloi kedarka, you're going to be chayiv skila if it's used for an avodah zarah. Hishtachava is the only exception. Hishtachava is a respectful as gesture. If God forbid it's made for an idol, there also, if it's not, even though it's not the kedarka, you will be chayav misa. But other than hishtachava, any other action that's done for an idol, if it's shaloi kedarka, like the Mishnah spoke out, you're going to be chayav alav, but you will not be chayav skila. And this is more or less, we're going to start again on Daf Samach Hamid Beis, that Rava bar Rav Chanan asked to Abaya, why don't we say that hishtachava should be the model? That even an avodah that's not done in the pnim, which would include many other gestures or services, should be something that if it's done at least derech kavod like hishtachava, you should be chayiv skila. And basically, if that would be the case, the Gemara answer is, then the pasuk in Mishpatim Zoiveyach Lo Elohim Yacharam is superfluous, it's not needed. We must say that Zoiveyach is the model that teaches for all else. And Zoiveyach is unique that it's taka only avodas panim. And therefore, if it's not avodas panim, you're not going to be chayiv, with the only exception of hishtachava. Now, we're going to have on Daf Samach Aleph some laws regarding a mesis. In other words, you have in Parshas Re'eh the specific, the detailed scenario where you have an instigator, the mesis, and you have the nisas, the one or the ones who are listening, God forbid, to the instigator concerning an avodah zarah, concerning worshiping avodah zarah. They're both going to be chayav misa. We're ultimately going to point out, and that will be the bulk of Daf Samach Aleph, that there is an apparent stira between our Mishnah and Daf Samach Hamid Beis, from where it's mashma that the chiyuv of misa, of worshiping avodah zarah, God forbid, is only when you actually worship. And in a Mishnah, Daf Samach Zayin Amid Beis, it's going to be mashma. It's actually clear that even if someone only says, I'm going to, God forbid, go and worship idols, for that declaration, that in itself brings about the chi of misa. So is it the service or is it the declaration? And we're going to link it to a scenario where the person responded, I'm going to go worship, a response to someone who's instigating. So there's the meses, there's the nisas, there's going to be various ways of reconciling this apparent contradiction. And with the ultimate, the end will be that it's b'chlal marastira, it's zu af zu, as we'll speak out when we learn the sugya. And Daf Samach Aleph, Amid Beis in the bottom, we're going to open up a big new topic. Here are the words. The topic is ha'ovid avodas kichavim ma'ahava oy meira. Whether the b'chlal chayiv misa or not, whether the chayiv or pater, whether the chayiv or pater. Pater means they're not even going to get another punishment. Abaya says chayiv, Rava says pater. There are so many different ways of understanding this inquiry. We're going to learn our sugya, Kishitas Rashi and others, that mi'ava or mi'ira means if someone worships an idol, not because they believe that there is some divinity in that thing, but because they love another person. So out of love for another person, they're worshiping the idol. or out of fear of another person, they're worshiping the idol with all of the details that we'll speak out. It's not fear of getting killed. Fear of getting killed, that Rambam paskins that even though Avodah Zarah is one of the three big ones for which a person should go al Kiddush Hashem, but if one didn't, then you're going to be potter. If someone's fear is not of death, it's fear of getting hurt, fear of financial loss. That in itself, L'Shitas Rava, will also bring about an exemption, and we're going to have a lot of challenges on Abaya and on Rava, and as we're going to unpackage it, we'll see how far we can get. We're going to learn about the unique korban chatos that a kohen Moshuach brings. When it comes to a korban chatos, the Torah differentiates between the Nasi and between the kohen Moshuach Molchama that we're speaking about. Now, the kohen Moshuach means not Moshuach Molchama. The kohen Gadol, the kohen that became a kohen Gadol because he was anointed, which is the way a kohen Gadol became a kohen Gadol up until when the Shaman HaMishcha was hid by Yoshiyahu HaMelech, like we keep on learning, be'erech 35 years before the Churban Bayis Rishon. Now, what's interesting regarding the unique chatos that a kohen Moshuach has to bring, that normally he only has to bring a korban chatos, not for him doing an act that inadvertently is a sin, but by him being a big scholar, and by him erroneously paskening wrong, and then he follows through his psak din, which is really the core topic of Masechtas Horos. In other words, the unique korban is only if he did it because he came to a wrong halachic decision. When it comes to a detailed sin of Avodah Zarah, there's a machlokes tanoim. Whether this unique korban of the kohen Moshuach only comes about if he makes a erroneous ruling, or Rebbe holds by Avodah Zarah, we don't say that. We say that if he, like any other yid, if they erroneously do something that you may not do, they're also, since he's a kohen gadol, he brings a different type of korban chatos, and we're going to learn many nuances regarding what does idol worship mean, especially when it comes to bowing down, when it comes to this ava and yira. If a person bows down and they don't even know they're bowing down to an idol. If a person is bowing down to an idol, but in their mind, they're not bowing down to Avodah Zarah, and many other such nuances which are amazing. Some scenarios, the person is going to be a bona fide oved Avodah Zarah. In some cases, a person won't be a idol worshiper. So let's just go back to Chap to Flow again to Daf Samach Amid Beis, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. So again, we have a pasuk by Zvicha, we have a pasuk by Yishtachava. And Chazal is telling us that the pasuk of Zvicha is the teacher, is the model. And only Avodos Pnim, which is Zvicha, which is Haktara, which is Nisuch, which includes, as we learned yesterday, Zrikas Hadam. Those are the Avodos for which, if anyone does them, God forbid, for an idol, even if it is Shaloi Kedarka, they're going to be Chayiv Skila. Hishtachava, bowing down on the Beis HaMikdash wasn't a bona fide Avodah, that's the only exception. That if a person bows down to an idol, even if that's not the way the Goyim worship the idol, they're going to be Chayiv Skila. But Ishtachava is not a model to any other respectful worship to an idol. So if a person, like the Mishnah says, embraces an idol or kisses an idol, if that's not the way the Goyim worship it, then the person won't be Chayiv Skila. Chayiv Lav, but not Chayiv Skila. And the question is, why? You have a pasuk of Zevicha. You have a pasuk by Ishtachava. Why don't we say that Yotzei Ishtachava l'lamed ala klol kulei? Let Ishtachava be the model to tell us that any respectful act of service to an idol, even if that's Shaloi Kedarka, even if that's not the way that idol is normally worshipped, is also going to be a violation for which you're going to be Chayiv Misa, Chayiv Skila. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you what. Or Rav is saying to himself, and if you're going to counter if that would be the case, then who needs the whole pasuk and mishpatim? Zoiveach lolohim yacharam. Zevicha is also a respectful act. Slaughtering an animal for an idol, it should be included in Ishtachava. So to Rav, to build up his question, he says, no. I'll tell you legufe. We learned this yesterday. Regarding which scenario, to tell you the machashvin ma'avoid al-avoid. That if a person did one action, and that action was not for idol worship, but during that action, they had in mind that the subsequent action will be done for idol worship. Are they going to be Chayiv Misa? maybe the Zoveach is going to tell you that yes, they'll be chayav misa. As we learned the Itman, guys, this machlikas hamirayim is not focused on whether you're chayav misa or not, but it's focused on another din shleima, which is that an animal that samach in the bottom, samach on the base in the bottom, that an animal that was worshipped as an idol becomes asur bahana. So what happens if someone shechted an animal? The act of shechita was not l'shem avodah zarah, but while they were slaughtering it, they had in mind that when I'm going to sprinkle the blood, that will be l'avodas kichav. Or while they shechted it, it was stam, it was not l'shem avodah zarah, but they had in mind lahaktir chel b'lavodas kichav, or any other subsequent action. Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, the animal becomes us. And as we spoke about yesterday, we learned that from pigul. Just like a thought of pigul, of some other, of chutz lizman, is going to disqualify the animal in the Beis HaMikdash. Even if, when the kohen shechted it, he had in mind, not regarding shechita, he had in mind, at least the hoylacha will be chutz lizman, or the kabbalah will be chutz lizman, or the zrika. It's bona fide pigul. So here also, machashvin lavoid lavoid. Reish Lakish says, don't compare it to pigul. And now the Gemara clarifies. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, I would already know machashvin lavoid lavoid, just like Rabbi Yochanan says that the animal is also bahana. That's the havamina now. Therefore, because of pigul, we would know on our own from pigul that you're going to be chayiv misa when you're machashvin lavoid lavoid. So therefore, the Zoveach would be superfluous. So therefore, you must use Zoveach as the model and the Hishtachava as the exception. So my kasha is not according to Rabbi Yochanan. According to Reish Lakish, I can argue that the pasuk is needed. Since Reish Lakish holds the animal is not asur bahana, nevertheless, Zoveach lo Elohim Yachram is telling you the animal is not asur bahana, but the one who did it is chayav misa. And if that's the case, that's the kasha. So why don't we therefore say that hishtachava should be the model? Now the Gemara is going to answer by taking a step back and by saying, neither statement that you made I accept. Not it's correct to say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, there's no kasha, nor is it correct to say that according to Reish Lakish, there is a kasha. Be'emes, l'kula alma, we don't need zoveach for this. And therefore, since Zoveach would be extra, it must be used as the model. So the Gemara says, Mask of Larav Papa, that's where we left off yesterday. What do I mean? You can't tell me that just because Rabbi Yochanan holds that mechashvin ma'avoida la'avoida makes the animal asur b'hana, it doesn't mean automatically that without a pasuk, the one who did it is chayav misa, because I can counter argue. Rabbi Yochanan was focused on the animal. Aval gavra maybe loy bar katolahu, and therefore the kasha is really even according to Rabbi Yochanan. Therefore, I can argue that you needed the zeveach lolohim to tell you that even the gavra is chayav misa. Furthermore, another step, be'emes. So first of all, the kasha of Rava is even according to Rabbi Yochanan. Eloma, the same answer you'll give to Rabbi Yochanan will be according to Reish Lakish. It's not correct. The Zoveach is extra. The Zoveach is extra. That even Reish Lakish, mi boyekra, if Zoveach is not the model to tell you that only if someone does avodas panim shaloi kedarka, you're going to be chayiv. If we're not going to say that Zoveach will be extra, why? Because at kan loy koshari Reish Lakish elo behema. Don't entangle, don't connect the status of the animal with the sin of the one who did it. And as we spoke at the Kitzah yesterday, that there are other scenarios where someone does an act of avodah zarah worship, even when they don't asid the chefza, but they are oved avodah zarah. So even Reish Lakish that holds that the animal remains mutar b'hana, logically, the one who did it, even though it was ma'avoida la'avoida, will be chayav misa. Why is that? That at kan like koshari Reish Lakish elo behema, but gavra logically bar kartolo who should be chayav misa. And where do I see that? Mida dahavaamishtach v'lahar. Someone bows down to something that's affixed, and the halacha is the har remains permitted. If not all of the mountains and the hills. You're kidding? The Canaanites and all the other pagans that lived in the Holy Land before God gave it to us, they worshipped everything there. Everything is mutar b'hana. Nevertheless, v'oivda b'sayif. Guys, just to make it clear, sayif, beheading, that's for a goy. A ben noyach, like we learned in the previous sugya, Ben Noach is chayiv, one type of death. For any violation of his mitzvahs or her mitzvahs, sayiv. That's referring a yid for avodah zarah skila. And what's the logic is that since the only way to sprinkle the blood, for example, is by shechting it. So if someone shechts an animal, not l'shem avodah zarah, but in order to sprinkle the blood to avodah zarah, for sure that shechita should be considered logically an act of idol worship. And you don't need the Zaveach L'Elohim for that. And therefore, because of that pasuk being extra, because of that, Muzman Zogin, Zaveach is the model, and Ishtachava is the exception. But we're going to have something which happens quite often, is that even though we came to that conclusion, the Gemara is going to spend a lot of time challenging the Havamina. Aside of this reason that Zaveach is extra, if not for that, Kum Tochois, Rava Bar Chanan, right? Rava Bar Rav Chanan was saying that Ishtachava should be the model. Gemara is going to say, how can he even think that because of X, Y, and Z, as we'll see in a moment. Just a side question, the animal will be also for sure. Animals, if not pigul, if he had it in mind during shechita that he's going to do something later for avodah zarah, that's a machlekes. But independent, logically, l'kula alma without a pasuk, the oived is chayiv. If he's a yid, chayiv skila. We are samach aleph, 10 lines from the top of the Amud. This flow is important to have. So and he's making it clear that his question is not on the maskana, it's only on the havamin. You see how strong do we say that a havamin and Torah is Torah? That the Gemara is going to spend a lot of time just trying to figure out what was even his havamin. That what? What did he say? That maybe maybe hishtachava should be the model. That any act that's respectful to an idol, even if it's shaloi kedarka, should bring about chiyuv skila. How can he say that? Why not? So Chevron, let's introduce other psukim in the Torah that speak about idol worship. This is a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. And the pasuk there reads, Pentidroish leloihehem, leimoy. We're going to go into the Holy Land and we're going to inquire regarding their gods with the little g. Eicha yavdu hagoyim ha'ela es eloheim. And God forbid, the Ese Cain Gamani, says the pasuk. So that's the pasuk. We learn from over here that worshiping, what are we saying? That the Yidden might say, they did it, we're going to do it. That's kedarka. That's kedarka. It doesn't matter whether it's respectful or not. But that is the source from where we see that worshiping an idol in any way, if that's the way they did it, Hashem is saying not to do it. Why do we need this pasuk? Now, here's the chayim. If we're learning the maskana the way we're learning, Zoiveach lo Elohim Yechkoram is telling you that the zvicha, which means zvicha, haktora, and nisuch, and also ishtachava, that's exception. If that's something that even though shaloi kedarka yechayiv skila, this pasuk in the egg is telling you that regarding other avodas, that's kedarka, not these four, you also chayiv skila. It works. But based on the Havamin of Rabbi Bar Rav Chanan, that no, Hishtachava already tells you that any act, even Shaloi Kedarka, if it's respectful, you're chayiv. Why do I need this pasuk Eicha? With any act, you're chayiv, even if it's Shaloi Kedarka. Why do I need to tell a pasuk Kedarka? Eicha Yavdu Lamutamai. You would know it anyways. And if you're going to answer, I'll tell you why. Because Hishtachava is respectful. Is respectful. Oh, what happens if a person does a disrespectful act to animals that are normally worshipped respectfully? Zoifche means animals to which you serve them by slaughtering. Slaughtering is called respectful. Poyer means to defecate. By the Baal Pa'oida was kedarkoi. That was because that's kedarkoi. But that if you do something disrespectful, you won't be chayiv. You won't be chayiv, and that's why you have eicha for, because eicha is telling you only if you worship a avodah zarah kedarka you chayiv. It's not needed. That we also know from ishtachava. Why? Ishtachava is a respectful act. I would know it from ishtachava. Ishtachava nafke, because I would say on my own, my ishtachava, that you're chayiv, and again you're chayiv the havamina, even if it's shaloi kedarka, but at least it's derech kavod. And that taka would include any other act, yekedarka, even shaloi kedarka, only derech kavod. So I would know from the hishtachava that if someone does something disrespectful, shaloi kedarka, to an avodah zara, they're not chayiv. Why do we need eicha for? Shouldn't that in itself prove everything switches? Now, guys, nachamol, if based on the maskana there's no kasha, once we say hishtachava is the exception. Zoveach lalahim means avodas pnim. What about other avodas that are not done on the Beis Hamikdash? We don't know that. Then you need the pasuk of eicha. But now, according to the Havamina, why would you need it? So what was even Rabbi Avraham Zajac Havamina? The Gemara says that's not a kash. Because I would tell you that without the pasuk eicha, I would have thought, what happens if someone does something disrespectful, shaloi kedarka, to an idol that's also worshipped disrespectfully? And the example will be, like we spoke about the bowling, that Merkulis, the way they worship this is by knocking it down. That's disrespectful. What happens if someone defecates for the Merkulis? See, that's already different. In other words, it's not someone who's poyed atzmai lezoifchem, because those animals are worshipped that are covered. This person, he shouldn't do it, but he's doing something disrespectful. He won't be chayiv. If not for eicha, one might have thought that if someone does one disrespectful action to an avodah zara, shaloi kedarka, but its darka is also disrespectful, maybe you would think you're chayiv. That's why eicha yavdu is only if you do it kedarka. That's al kadai techamino hoyel vavidosei anyways is bizoyin, which is throwing stones. So maybe any type of service, even if it is shaloi kedarka, you're defecating. So that's why you need the eicha. Says the Gemara, nisht. I still have a problem. I still have a problem on the havamin of Rabbi Avraham. Elo hod amar Rabbi. Guys, we're going to go with the Girsa Rabbi Elazar. He asked me, another question. Merkulis is worshipped disrespectfully. What happens if someone does zvicha to the Merkulis? Now, zvicha is something respectful. How do you know they're chayiv? Shenemar. Now you can argue, hold on. Why did we say that zeveach le'elohim yacharam? Any act of zvicha, but maybe since that avodah zara is done, shaloi derech kavod, maybe that won't be good. So he has a pasuk in Achli Mois. It's a pasuk that's hard to touch, but the pasuk writes, that we will no longer offer karbanos to demons or to avodah zara. Now, holding on, says Rabbi Elazar, we know that an act of zevicha that's kedarka is also that we know. So, how do I know that? From the pasuk eicha yavdu. So says Rabbi Elazar, today kedarka. Okay, now comes the kash. In other words, we know that an act of zevicha, even shaloi kedarka, same is pashat kasha. If hishtachava is telling me, havamina, that any respectful act, even shaloi kedarka, like bowing down, is going to be chayiv, then you don't need the pasuk. Shaloi kedarka mishtachava nafka, according to the havamina, according to the havwa, so it's going to become also extra. So you don't need the dasi'irim, according to the Havamina. So the Gemara says, according to the Havamina, I would say you need the pasuk dasi'irim in the unique case, which is what happens if someone worships an idol. They don't believe in the idol. They know that God doesn't like it, and God forbid they want to get God angry. It's like a little child, they want to get the father angry. Without the dasi'irim, you would have thought you're not chayiv misa. Because you're not doing an avodah zara, you're just getting God angry. That's the pasuk. That's why you would still need the pasuk in Achli Mois v'lo yisbechu oides of chem lasi'irim. Even there you chayav misa. So what we find answered is why there was a havamina. But the bottom line is that the maskana is the four avodas that the Mishnah mentioned: zevicha, haktora, chevra nisuch, and ishtachava. Whether it's kedarka shaloi kedarka yechayiv skilam. Remember, any other action, even a disrespectful action, if it's kedarka, chayv misa. Hapoyer lebal poer, hazoyrek even lemarkulis. But an action that's respectful. But the goyim don't worship the idol with that respectful act, even though you're chayv lav, the tarnished, and they're malkis, but there's no chiyuv misas beis, and there's no chiyuv skin. Okay, now new topic. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Nuna irkus elei toira. Rabbi Nuna lost his oxen. and therefore he went to look for it. So, Bekitza Yidden, you're looking for your oxen, you're doing business. When I meet you, when you meet me in the marketplace, the hashgacha pratis of him losing his oxen was not for him to go looking for his oxen, but the Rabba had a psakasha. So now Rabba saw him, Amachaye, Pogebe Rabba, and what's in between the lines? He didn't tell Rabba, not now, I'm looking for my oxen. Could be he lost the oxen for good. By the time they finished this whole machlokes over here, so Rabba Chaptarain, he sees Rav Hamnuna. So Rabba asked Rav Hamnuna, we spoke out in the intro, and I'll tell you the whole thing by heart. This goes until the middle of Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Our Mishnah spoke about ha'oived avodas kechavim, meaning from when you chayiv misa, from when you did, not you chas v'shalom, from when a person did avodah zarah, they did the action, whatever it was. Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis. Now Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis is speaking about the mesis and the nisos. It's just a scenario of avodah zarah. There's an instigator. The instigator, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven tells Shimon, why don't you worship idols? So when Shimon responds, I'll do it, he's already chayiv misa. It's the chanaya that not only when you do the action, even when you say you'll do the action. That's the stira. Is it doing it or is it saying you're going to do it? That Tanan is our Mishnah Samach Amud Beis. Ha'oived, you see, you did it. Ha'oived, meaning oivedin, but only oimer. No one is suggesting that you should make such a statement, but just by saying you're not chayiv misa yet, you didn't do it yet, which by the way fits the normal rules. When it comes to other avedas, machshava ra'a eina kodesh baruch hu mitzaref la'maisa. But nevertheless, it says v'hanan tanan. This is a Mishnah on Daf Samach Zayin. Ha'omer evoid. Ha'omer evoid is where the maces is speaking about an idol that's right there. So he says, I'm going to do it. Or I'm going to go and do it. I'm just explaining why I'm going to go and do it, because that's a scenario where the avodah zarah is far away. I'm going to go. Or the maces spoke to many people. And many people responded in the plural. We will go. Neilech v'navoid. The Mishnah there says that statement chayv skila. Simple question. So that's the kasha Rabba asked Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna forgot about his oxen altogether, and now we begin. On my way. Answer number one responds to Rav Hamnuna to Rabba that the case over here, really for just saying you're chayav misa. Over here is einay mekabli alai elabavoid. He says, if a person says, I'm going to worship the idol, but I'm only going to consider it a getchke when I do the avodah. Then, before they do the avodah, they're not chayiv misa. Mashenken and Daf Samach Zayin, Ba'oimer means he already was makabel that thing, Yoshka Pandrik, he's chayiv misa right away. Okay, that's his answer. Now, Rabbi Yosef B'chal didn't like the kasha, because it's very common, Shmuel, you have a Mishnah here, you have a Mishnah there. Mishnahs don't have to fit. Every Mishnah can be authored by another Tana. Right? Like, Rashi Tosfos. When you have a Rashi, Stira, and Rashi, you got a problem. Because it's the same Rashi. Tosfos is never a Stira. Tosfos here, Tosfos there. There were so many Bala Tosfos. In other words, Rabbi Yosef Omar, I don't understand. Tanoi shokalt ma'alma. You're chapping, you're picking Mishnahs and you're saying, it's a Stira. Of course, it's a Machlokes Tanoim. Tanoyehi. The Tanya, and he's linking it to the following machlokes that we have in the Braisa. This is a unique case. There's a maces, but Shmuel, the maces, the instigator, is not saying go serve Yashka. The maces is saying go serve me. Ich bin the deity. Rav Meir says, now here, guys, don't get confused. Here we're not speaking about the worshiper, the nisos. Here we're focusing, the maces is also chayiv misa. Rav Meir says he's chayiv. The maces is chayiv right away because he instigated. Rabbi Yehuda says he's potter. Now we're going to see later. This is unique. There's unique because he's asking the person to worship him. It's less probable that he'll be worshipped. We'll see. But we're going to put that aside. Without making that nafkamina, it's about unique because he says, "Go worship me." The Gemara wants to say, what's the machlokes over there? So first of all, clarifies Rabbi Yosef, Eicha the palchu, if the nisas taka worship the maces. That the maces is chayiv. And listen to this drasha, because it says, loisasa locha pesel. So how is he teaching Rabbi Yosef? Mach sich nicht for a pesel. You don't become a pesel. Once the nisas worshipped him, he became a pesel, he's chayiv misa. Ki pliga is b'dibur ba'alma. B'dibur ba'alma means the nisos didn't do anything yet. The nisos didn't do anything yet. Elomasu, why should the maces be chayiv? Because he spoke words. Rav Meir holds dibur milsehi. That's why chayiv misa, the maces. Rabbi Yehuda Sover dibur lav milsehi. You understand, guys? So now let's put it together. So now it fits over here. Over Rabbi Yehuda holds dibur lav milsehi. That's Samach Hamad Beis. If dibur lav milsehi on the maces, so dibur lav milsehi by the nisas. You only chayiv misa when you do it. The Mishnah Daf Samach Zayin is going to hold dibur milsehi. Will be like Rav Meir.
The Mishnah here, if there is a one basis for this did
that's for sure. The Baraisa is where he says, "Come and worship me," and we'll see there's something unique about that. The Mishnah here is speaking about the oivid, not the maces.
But
He's going to be chayiv. We'll see in a moment. If a maces tells a person go worship another idol, in many cases he'll be chayiv misa right away. And that's the point. What I said is wrong. Really, it's your question, Shlomo. It's even Rabbi Yehuda's Maida, not in the case that we just learned. Not come and worship me. If a Mesis says go worship that, even Rabbi Yehuda says the Mesis is chayiv. Tanya, it's really a brayse. Rabbi Yehuda evoid. Or elach ve'evoid, nelach ve'navoid. Clearly, you see, right, that words, clearly, words is machayev misa. And therefore, words is machayev misa by a maces also. Here is different. The machlokes here, before we come back to the study on the Mishnayos, the machlokes, when a guy says, come worship me, the Michael Mifligi, the maces la'atzmai. And the other person even said yes. Nevertheless, there's a machlokes. It's a machlokes whether that's considered a significant instigation. It's taka different. Go worship someone else or go worship me. Marsover, that's Rav Meir. Mesis la'atzmai. Even if a person is instigating that he should be the subject of idol worship, shamilei. The nisos can obey him. Guys, it's hard to relate to it because we don't have a taiva. They had a taiva to that. To worship. Yeah. So you instigate, like we are, wherever our taiva is, don't go there, because we know that if I have a yetzer hara towards something, once it's instigated, it comes a point, a person is going to fall. And he says the indika, which is why Rabbi Meir is mechayev. Rabbi Yehuda unique in that case. When a guy says worship me, says la'atzmai, there is loishamalei. That is where the nisos won't listen. Why? Because Meimir Amri, the nisos tells himself that he's different than me. He's a getchke. He's just like me. It's a joke. What's I was saying? And he said, even though he said yes, we'll leave it in the comedy. Sometimes people say yes, halachically, they're laughing at you. Like, don't bother me. Yeah. The comedy. So Bekitzer, first of all, Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda that you quoted has no relation to our question. For whatever reason, he rejected the answer of Rav Hamnuna. Right? What did Rav Hamnuna answer? Rav Hamnuna answered that our Mishnah is when he says, I'm not mekabelit. If he would say, I'm mekabelit, he would be chayev skila even before he worshipped it. When someone is instigating, and a guy says, yeah, I'm going to go over there. The nisos is also chayev misa. But Rabbi Yosef rejected that. So here, before we go on, Yeshmuli, what did you want to say?
Oh, it's like, is that like when a person says worship me, is that like, what if the person's like more powerful or like more important than another person?
All these nuances could be enough kamina. Here we're not going to focus on it yet. Okay. So Masnisan, the way Rabbi Yosef is going to reconcile this tiram. Again, what happened to Rav Hamnuna with the oxen, I have no idea. I'm telling you, that was gone. Kan, I guess, kan means here and Samach Zayin. You have to know how to hold cup here. And Daf Samach Zayin, you're chayiv even by just saying, that's biyachid. Look at the psychology. Biyachid hanisas. Kan, meaning on Daf Samach, you only chayiv misa when you do the idol worship is if there is a rabbim that are saying they're going to do it. But rabbim hanisasim, and he explains it. Yochid, le'mimlach, a yochid will not be considered. A psychology. Sometimes it's the opposite. He holds that way. In other words, a person makes a commitment, maybe dafka because they are alone. They know, I don't have anyone to support me. I'm by myself. So when I'm committed, I'm going to do it. And therefore, v'toy basrei, he's going to go after it. So therefore, he's chayav misa. Rabim, when a group makes a commitment, groups should be considered. Rabim mimlechi, therefore, it could be, and hopefully, uloi to basrei, and therefore, when are they chayav misa? Only when they worship. Amar Rav Yosef, no, I mean Allah. How do I know that? Because in Parshas Re'eh, when it says regarding idol worship, the Torah says regarding in the Mesos, the Parsha of Mesos and Nisos, Loi soiveloi, the Torah says, don't accede to him. Loi sishma elav, don't hearken to him. In other words, the point is, don't listen means is that the chiyuv doesn't come only because he made a declaration. It's because he's listening. It's about the level of buying into it. That's his diuk. Ha'ava v'shama, if he bought into it, he's chayiv. Taka, even though he didn't worship. And this psychology that a rabbim, when a rabbim makes a commitment, they don't buy into it until they do it. The Gemara is going to give a counter logic. Says the Gemara, Eisvei Abaya, this is classical to Rav Yosef. Mishani ben Nisis to rabbim l'nisis to yachid. I don't think there's such a difference. And this is not instigated by a rabbim, guys. We're speaking about the nisas. Whether a yachid was nisas or whether a rabbim is nisas. And I'll prove to you that there is no difference. Another quotation from Parshas Re'eh in this whole parsha of an instigator and an instigated. When you who's Beni Mecha, we have the whole Rashi there. Why dafke Beni Mecha? But anyways, over here, so guys, this is the rule in English, right? You can mean you to a yachid. You can mean you to a rabbim. In this pasuk, ki yisischa, the Brayso says it means both. Echad yachid hanisos ve'echad rabbim hanisos. So it's the parsha begins by dafka not differentiating. It's about both cases. Where an instigator is speaking to one, where an instigator is speaking to many. And v'hoitzi, now another detail says this Brayso. Let me just say it out by heart. There's a phenomena that happens that if there was an act of instigation to a rabbim, what happens if the rabbim taka served avodah zarah? That's called the irani dachas. So something very unusual happens. Just to know that as we're learning in this Pedic Arba Misos, we do put in we give a hierarchy to what's considered a more chamur dika death biyad bezdin and what's considered less. Sometimes there's a machlokes tanoim. But between skila and sayif, l'kula alma. Skila is more chamur, sayif is more kal. For the sin of, God forbid, idol worship, we know that's what we're learning now. We're in the topic of skila. But you know what? The moment the roiv of the city becomes oiv de avodah zarah, God forbid, that's a din of nidachas. Even though there is a misa, it becomes more kal, sayif. But on the other hand, when a person serves idols, he gets punished, but his property is not taken away. When the irani dachas gets involved in avodah zarah, the Torah writes the livestock is killed, right? All of the inanimate items, they're burned. The kitzer, he'll lose all of your property. So the Brayso says, even though the parsha begins with an instigator to both a yachid and a rabbim, but there is a difference whether he instigated a yachid or a rabbim, which is yachid michlal rabbim lahachman al gufay. If there's only a yachid, and so then the din is a yachid who worships avodah zarah, like we said, gets skila. So there's a chumrah. But on the other hand, there's no penalty given. There's nothing that's done to this oivid avodah zarah's property. When there is a rabbim, mechlal yachid, which is lahakal al guf, from mitzad echad, everyone gets killed, so to say, only besayif. It's considered kuladik. Ulahachman al mamoinam. End of quote. Point is that only b'hamil sahu deshani. Ava b'chol mini ki adadinino. So you, Rav Yosef, you're trying to make this differentiation that when the nisos only verbally commits, there is an afkamina. Why wouldn't the Brayso mention it? The Brayso mentioned the only difference between yachid and rabbim. Lahakal al gufam or lahakal al mamoinam, which are either way. So therefore, he doesn't accept this way of reconciling the Mishnayos. Abaye has another answer. Elamar Abaye, kan here means on daf samach. is benisois bifnei atzmai. Like we said, our Mishnah doesn't speak about maces. The Mishnah began, we learned yesterday, you went on your own. If a person goes on their own, there's no one instigating them. You know when the Chayiv Misa? When they did it. If they didn't do it, it's a machshavara. Machshavara, ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah for l'maisa. Daf Samach Zayin is speaking about a scenario where the person didn't on his own say, I'm going to worship. There was a maces. It's different. Then he's chayiv even for saying, Kan v'nisas l'pnei achedim. And he explains this type of psychology, explains further Abaya. Mipi atzmai, if a person in their minds, they make a hachlata, it's shayach, mimlach, they'll reconsider. And therefore, they're only going to be chayiv when they do it. But mipi achedim, gorer basrayu. The opposite of Raja, and I can say like this, that if everyone is different. I relate to Abaya. Makes a big, it's easy for me to chat this. Okay, right. Amar Abaya and Mino, again, I'll prove it to you, because since it says in the parsha of Maces, don't listen to him. Don't accede to him. Don't hearken to him. Again, from there you can be medayik that if you only listened, you're already going to be chayiv. No, it's only making the declaration fits, but it fits the parsha in the A of maces. If there is no maces, you're only chayiv for action. Rava Amar, Rava gives another answer. Even our Mishnah can be speaking about achedim. First of all, Rava is not denying that our Mishnah can also be mepeyatzmai. But even mepeyachedim, so look at this. This has to do with marketing. How strong was the instigation from the instigator? If the instigator says, go worship an idol, he didn't explain why. Then the Nisos, even though the Nisos, God forbid, says, yeah, he's not going to be chayv until he does it. But if the Maces says, if you're going to worship an idol, things will be good for you, he'll sell it, he'll market it. The more he markets it, the more there is a chance that the Nisos will do it. So he's going to be chayv right away. Last narrow line. Guys, means daf samach zayin. You're chayv only for the commitment. The amalei, that's when the maces told the nisas. First, he's explaining how to worship the idol. The idol likes this food. The idol likes this liquids. And you know what happens to you if you do it? He tells them the maces. Kach metiva, kach meria. He can make it good for you. He can make it bad for you. In other words, since the maces explain the benefits of the avodah, there's a higher chance that the nisos will do it after he made the commitment. He's chayv nisa right away. Our Mishnah daf samach. He didn't explain the benefits. He just told him, go worship idols. And the person, God forbid, said, yeah, that is not machayev anything yet. And Amar Rabbi Allah, that what? That marketing something will affect the halachic outcome of committing to that which was properly marketed to you. Because it says, all in the parish over there of Maces in the A, that when you're going to see, you're going to ask to yourselves that right, you're going to say, how did they worship it? We just quoted this pasuk and the person is going to say ve'esachen gamani, God forbid. Oh, so why did the Torah B'chalaf to speak about idols that are close or far? It must be hachi ka'amrulei. This is what the Maces is saying, that mitivusam shal kerovim atolamed al tivusam shal rechoikim. This is what there's a statement that Chazal say, haroitze l'shaker yarche kedusa. It's a good klal on life. When people want to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge, if it's not emes, they're going to speak about something that's far away because you cannot verify it. That's the Maces is saying, I want you to worship the idol over there. They make it sound exotic. Ooh, the goyim over there and by the Buddha, by the Far East. Wow, they make it sound like who knows what. Why don't they try to sell you Yashka Pandrik? Because the ones that are near, that it's garnished. So they try to sell you something that's far away. So the Torah is already being meramas. You should know that why should the ones far away be anything more effective than the ones over here? And that just like the ones over here are garnished, the ones over there are not. In other words, my love, why is all that needed? Because the Maces is selling the whole thing. He's being masbir, you'll worship that idol over there, they do it that way, and it's going to be good for you. My love, the Amalei, kach mecheles, kach shoyse, kach metiva, kach meria, indeed, shma mino. Parshas Re'eh, Parshas Maces is when the Maces is giving a whole marketing. And over there, if the Nisas responds, Eilech ve'evoid chayev misa. Mishnah Daf Samach Zayin. Over here, even if there's a Maces, if he doesn't sell it properly, you only chayev misa when you do the service. Rav Ashi Yomar, I'll give you another explanation. You know why the Samach Zayin you're chayev misa for saying? It's speaking about a Yid that already worshipped idols in the past. So we know that he already did it. Now, why wasn't he killed until now? Because there wasn't Asra until now. So when a Yisrael is a Mumar, logical, then if he only just says, I'm going to do it, he's chayiv misa already. Because he already did it. If someone, Daf Samach, he never worshipped idols before. There, you only chayiv misa when you did it. Gavaldik. And the final answer, Ravina Amar, B'chlal, who told you it's a stira? It's called Loi Zu Av Zu Ktani. I hope I said it good in the intro. Loi Zu Av Zu, it's common that Rabbeinu HaKadosh begins Menakal El HaKovet. In other words, he begins the sugya of Avodah Zarah, Daf Samach. If you worship idols, the Mishnah agrees that even if he only said he's also chayiv. But you introduce a topic and then you say, you know what? Not only if you worship idols, even if you only say Eilech ve'evoid, you're also going to be chayiv. B'chlal, there's no stira. Gavaldik. Okay, now we're starting the new topic that will go into Samach Beis. Now there's very foundational differences between the Rishonim how to learn this. We're going to learn Shitas Rashi. Listen to this topic. Itmer. If a person worships idol from love or fear, says Rashi, from love of another person, which means they're not moided that idol has any divinity in it. Reuven loves Shimon. Shimon Nebach is an angefallen on Avodah Zarah, was a big type. Shimon is telling Reuven to worship. Or even if he didn't say it, Reuven is worshiping the idol because he loves Shimon. Or Yira, that Reuven is afraid of Shimon. He doesn't believe in the idol. He's only worshiping the idol because he's afraid. Now, this is problematic because as we spoke on Bekitzer, the three Avedas for which a Yid has to give his life, one of them is Avodah Zarah. That's Yira. What's Yira mean? Shimon tells Reuven, if you're not going to worship idols, I'm going to kill you. So Koidim called that Ramam Taka Paskins, that even though Yaharoig, right, Yehorig Va'al Yavoid, but the Ramam writes, but if a person couldn't be Omed bin Asoyin, and they worship the idol, Miyira, the Ramam writes, they're not going to be Chayiv Misa.
Maybe the intention is not there?
No, not maybe, because the intention is not, that's the topic here. The intention is not there. Hold on. To make the sugi simpler, the way they explain Bishitas Rashi, Yira doesn't mean of death. We're not speaking about fear of death. Yira means what happens if a person is afraid of bodily harm or of financial loss. That's also called Yira. The point is, the way Rashi learns, he's not Mekabel deity. That means there's no intention. He's not worshiping the idol because he believes in the idol. He's only doing it. He's doing an external act because of love of another person or because of fear of another person. What's the din? Machloikes Abaye and Rava. Abaye says chayev, Rava says pot. And guys, just good to remember from the beginning, a klal, that whenever Machloikes Abaye and Rava, right, halacha, kerava, chutz, miyal kegam. This is not the yal kegam cases, but here we have a Machloikes Abaye and Rava. Abaye says chayev, the hapolcha, he worshipped. Rava says patur. What's the point? Listen, it fits. If when he did the act, he was makabel, he accepted that thing has some sort of divine power, then in takiya chayv misa, chayv skila, ben noyach chayv asayif. But Eloi, it's how important is intent when it comes to idol worship. That's the machloikas Abaye and Rava. And now a siman for the subsequent sugya will be Eved Yishtach Mashiach. Gavaldik. Sometimes the mnemonics are harder to remember. This is so easy. And Eved, bowing down, is an act of a bittul. And Eved will bow. We all should be avadim that will bow down to Mashiach. Amen. So let's go. Amen. Abaye. The first one is from the Eved. Allah. How do I know that you're chayiv? Zok Abaye from our Mishnah. Ditnan. Daf Samach Amud Beis. It says in our Mishnah, remember the kasha we asked yesterday? So the Mishnah then began to specify. The Mishnah says, Echad ha'oived, the Echad ha'mizabeach, the Echad ha'makatif, the Echad ha'menasech. And the Gemara asked in the beginning, what's the echad ha'ovid? Now we have the answer of Rabbi Yirmiyah, but Abaya is not accepting the answer of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Why the word ovid is extra? Klal uprat. The Mishnah began klal. When you're being mefared, the first prat is mizabeach. What's this ha'ovid? And my love, l'chura, that's Abaya's raya. The ha'ovid means that even if you are only ovid me'ava or me'ira, you're chayav skila. So that's a raya to Abaya, but it's not a kashan Rava, because Rava Amalach, no, that's not pshat. We just learned it yesterday. That ha'ovid means if a person did an avoida that's kedarka to any idol, the chayiv skila. Kedarka. If a person does something shaloi kedarka, then they're not going to be chayiv skila aside of the four. That's the whole sugya that we're learning. Then the ha'ovid means kedarka no matter what. That's the ha'ovid. But it has to be l'shem elokah, mekabel elokah. Eloha, to correct myself. We only make the hay into a kaf if it's we're speaking about the God with the big G, the capital G. Amar Abaye, another raya. That's the second of the Namanik. The Tanya, when it says in the Aseres Hadibros, lo isishtach velohem, zok the Braisa lohem yatem ishtach. Ato avol atem ishtach velo odam kavoischom. You are allowed to bow down to a person like you, meaning, this is important, that bowing down to a person as an act of respect is mamash muter. Verstehst? Because how do we know that? Because it says lohem. Yochoil afilu ne'evod kahaman. You might think, now guys, Haman thought he deferred to himself as a getchkin. Would that be allowed? No. Talmud loimer. No. If the person is claiming to be a deity, then even bowing down to a person is also loisa of them. End of Braisa. Now says the Gemara, Haman miyira hava neva. The Torah writes befedish. The Torah means ksuvim. Over there in the Megillah, it says that everyone would bow down. Why? Because the king commanded so. It says so befedish. In other words, l'chu'ura, that's a raya that even though everyone bowed down to Haman, and the Braisa is saying that bowing down to Haman is not okay. Not because they accepted Haman as a god. They only did it out of fear of the king. Still, that's something that you're not allowed to do. That's a gavaldik raya to Abaya. So Rava says, no. The Braisa doesn't mean mamish like the case of Haman. Kahaman, but v'loy kahaman. The Haman, the iyo gufei avaris kechav. When are you chayv to bow down? When the Haman said he's a god, and the person bowing down is doing it as a god. In other words, the Braisa says like this: bowing down to a person out of respect is okay. Bowing down to the person thinking he's a getchker, that's also. Actually, in the case of Haman, according to Rava, even though Haman says he was a deity, if a person would have bowed down to Haman, this is according. One second. If a person would have bowed down to Haman, not because Haman is a deity, but only because he would not be chayiv. Was the Braisa's lat meyira, but if it's meyira, you put it. Now hold on. In other words, Rav is really saying that if anyone would bow down to Haman, since the bower, the ovid, is only doing it from yira of the king Achashverosh, he would be putted. That's a problem. So why didn't Mordechai bow down? That's the kash. And don't forget, we paskin like Rabbi. So look inside the Toysus, the one Toysus, 7 lines from the bottom. 7 lines from the bottom. Zog Toysus vim toimer lirava. Indeed, amai lo yishtachve Mordechai lo Haman. That's mamish the case of Ha'ovid, even though Haman was claiming that he is as a got, a getchke, but that was not Mordechai's intent. So v'yesh loimer keda Amar b'medrish shehoyu tzulamim al liboy. Ad hayoyim hazeh. The goyim go with the cross on the necklace. That's it. In other words, they don't know where it comes from. There's so much into Avodah Zarah. People bow down as respect. People do it, and that's okay. When we meet each other, you can do that. But what Haman did was he put an Avodah Zarah on his chest, a liboy. So that's why Mordechai couldn't bow down. Or Tosfos writes, Inami Bishum Kiddush Hashem, which is a huge topic. In other words, it was unique. Me'iker adin, Mordechai could have bowed down to Haman. Look, Lidova. Even though Haman was claiming he's a getchke, but he was only doing it Meyiras HaMelech. But there's a Kiddush Hashem aspect when a Jew doesn't bow down. It's a mighty dicker thing. There was the Rabbi Rashi from Mexico, whose name I forgot of blessed memory. He went to Iran during the Iran hostages in 79, and there were Yidden amongst the Americans that were taken hostage. And the story is that they were all of the people that the Iranian government allowed in to be there for the Jewish soul, for the clergy, to be there for the hostages. They were invited to a prayer. Khomeini was by that prayer. That means there were hundreds of thousands of goyim there. They all bowed down. The only person that didn't bow down was this Rav from Mexico, the koyach of a person. And he says he stood up. He says a few seconds later, security people took him. And they brought him to Khomeini. And Khomeini asked him, why didn't you bow down? So he told him that I'm a Jew and I only bow down to God. And being that I don't understand the language, I don't know what is being bowed down to, I didn't bow down. And Khomeini was so impressed by that. You know, the koyach to be in such a country at that time. So that is what Taka helped him later when he wanted to bring to them a menorah to light, and he spoke to them about the Yidden. It had a big positive effect, the koyach of a person. Okay. Let's go to the last one. Let's see how far we can get. That if you are oivid, now here we need to give a few words of very important introduction. When you can open up a Chumash and Pashas Vayikra, you're going to see when it comes to a carbon chatos, which is basically brought for violating a negative commandment, for which you would be chayv kadas if you did it b'mezid. Not everyone brings exactly the same type of carbon. So the Torah speaks about the nasi, has his unique carbon. The Torah speaks about a kohen gadol, which is called here the kohen Moshiach. And by the way, during this man Vayesheni, when the kohen only became a kohen gadol because he wore the meruma begadim, he was not included in this parsha. Now, what's important is that there's something unique about the carbon Moshiach, and that we'll learn in Hoidius. That when does the kohen Moshiach bring a different type of carbon chatos, not stam when he does a shoygig. When he was a scholar, he was learned, and he betoos erroneously misunderstood the halach. That's called helam davar. Means he learned wrong pshat, and therefore he acted wrong. However, in Parsha Shlach, there's a whole Parsha also about this helam davar. How sometimes if the Sanhedrin makes a mistake concerning Avodah Zarah, that there is a carbon upon the Sanhedrin, how the Kohen Moshiach has to bring a carbon concerning Avodah Zarah. So says the Braisa, Kohen Moshiach by Avodah Kachavim, Rebbe holds is unique. Rebbe holds that by Avodah Zarah, the Kohen Moshiach is like any other Yid. What triggers the unique Kohen Moshiach's chatos? Only Shigagas Maisa. You don't need to have that. He has to learn wrong pshat in a din. You don't need helam davar. The chachamim hold, like in all cases, for helam davar. Now the Braisa says v'shavin that whatever triggers, when he has to bring a carbon for avodah zarah, he brings a seira, which would mean that the kohen Mashiach will have to bring a female goat like any other commoner kiyachid, and also v'shavin she'ein nevi asham talui. So here's the rule: by a commoner, a sin for which you bring out carbon chatos, eating chaylev b'shoigig, if there is a doubt whether I ate chaylev or not, when it's chazik yisura, asham talui. Elokula alma, a kohen Mashiach never brings an asham talui. Question is, what about by avodah zarah? So even l'shitas Rebbe that holds that a kohen Mashiach ba'avodas kichavim is like every other Jew, only for shigagas ma'isa do you bring a chatos, but he will never bring an asham talui. And now I know it's late. Let's chaparayim, which means shigagas ma'isa. How is it shaykh l'Rebbe? Not what's shigagas ma'isa by avodah zarah? And guys, I know it's late, but every line is gold here. And we're going to have this repeated a few times in Daf Samachal. If it means a person went into a Beis HaKnesses means he went into a Beis HaKnesses to avodah zarah, and he bowed down. But he thought it's for God. He Pasha didn't know. And really it was an avodah v'ishtach. That, of course, harei liboy lashamayim. In other words, Rashi writes, look inside Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom. not only is he not amazed, it's not even called a shoygig. He taka bow down to God. And the Bechlal, Rashi writes, when a person is in a building, they don't bow down to the building, even the goyim. They're bowing down to their getchke. So it's garnished. Back in the Gemara. Ella, maybe the Chazal on Darto that he saw a statue. Now, there were statues that were kings. Bowing down to a statue of a king is not ideal, but it's not bona fide avodah zarah. And he bowed down to it. So here again, if he was mekabelit as Elohim, that's called Mezid. Daf Samach Beis. If he was not mekabelit Elohim, again, laf klumu. That's the whole parsha also by Hanani, Mishal Vazaria. They didn't bow down to the statue of the king. That was like Toysvus. That was beyond. Elo lav l'chu'ura. That what happens. The shoygig is that he bowed down, knowing that he's bowing down to an avodah zarah, without any intention. Right? He only did it out of love and fear for another person. That's called shigas ma'isa. Shigas ma'isa means, according to Abai, because you're taka chayiv. He thought you're not chayiv. The chayda, that's the case. And the Rava says, no, that the case of, it means he thought it's bechlal not a problem to bow down to avodah zarah. He didn't know, as I'm mitzias, that there's any problem with avodah zarah. So it says the Gemara, oimer muter, isn't that a wrong psak din? So the Gemara says, but oimer muter legamri is not called a wrong psak din. Helam davar is kio mixas or bitol mixas. We'll learn this in Hoydius. This is important. This din of Hoyru Bezdin or Kohen Moshiach, that they made a mistake in a detail and then they did the sin, is not if they made a Amaratz's dika mistake. Like here, he Bechlal didn't know you can't worship idols. The whole parsha of Helam Davar means he knows that you can't eat Calif, but the Bezdin or the Kohen Moshiach, so